No introduction today. No welcome to Behind the Line. I'm just going to get right into it. I'm liable to get into a rant at certain points, just to give you a warning. Sunday was another great day of NFL football, but it was awful in many ways. I'll get to the good, the bad, and the ugly in a minute, but opening up today, I want to talk about my New Orleans Saints. Now, I'll admit, the past 13, 14 years, those of us in New Orleans, we've been spoiled by the Saints. Since 2006, I've been excited every year entering the NFL season. I always knew that with the combination of Sean Payton and Drew Brees, that the Saints had a chance at the Super Bowl. Every year, coming into the season, I believed that the Saints had the opportunity to win the Super Bowl with Peyton and Brees. The past couple of years, as Drew Brees has gotten older, the games and the seasons have meant more because I never knew if it were going to be the last season he's played. 2017, 2018, there were rumors floating around about his retirement. I honestly believe that if the Saints would have won the Super Bowl in either one of those 2 years, that Drew Brees would have rode off into the sunset. So this year, with him being 40 years old, we know that retirement is around the corner. He might be like Tom Brady and play until 42, 43, but we don't know that. Now, Sean Payton signed a 5-year extension Sunday morning. His departure in New Orleans has been rumored for the past several years as well. It's been chatter throughout the league that Sean Payton was going to take over for Jason Garrett in Dallas as soon as Drew Brees retired in New Orleans. Sean Payton has a home in Dallas. He likes it there. He only lives in New Orleans during the regular season. But that was all squashed with this 5-year extension that he signed Sunday morning. He was the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys under Bill Parcells. One of the reasons that Tony Romo had such a prolific career, Peyton played a huge part in the development of Romo. So hearing that he signed that extension Sunday morning, I was ecstatic. I knew the Saints were in good hands for the next 5 years. Coming into the game against the Rams in Los Angeles, I actually liked the Saints to win. You heard me in my NFL picks on Saturday. The Saints were getting 1.5 points. I liked them to go into LA and win on Sunday. With all the offseason moves, this team was better, in my opinion, than both the rosters in 2017 and 2018. Last year, that team should have been in the Super Bowl. If not for that non-pass interference call that we've seen a million times already, I feel like the Saints would have beaten New England in the Super Bowl last year. Now, last week I talked about growing up a Saints fan and how luck never seemed to be on our side. Until Brees and Peyton arrived in 2006 and turned around the franchise, really turned around the city of New Orleans after the destruction of Katrina in 2005. We fans in New Orleans have grown accustomed to bad things happening. Weird turnovers, bad calls by the officials. Basically, things never going the Saints' way. In Los Angeles Sunday, everything that could go wrong for New Orleans went wrong. And it started early in the first quarter. First drive of the game. Brees hits a perfect pass to Jared Cook for a first down. Cook ends up getting rocked by one of the Rams defenders. Fumbles the ball. Ball literally lands on top of one of the Rams defenders, who's fucking laying down on his back on the field. It was unbelievable. But all good. At that time I was like, first drive of the game, Brees and the Saints, they'll bounce back. Then the absolute worst happened. Something that hasn't happened in the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era in New Orleans. Aaron Donald's rushing Brees on a third down and ends up jamming his throwing hand on a pass play. Initially, it didn't seem to be that big of a deal. But as we all know now, this is serious. More on that in a minute. After the Brees injury on Sunday, everything fell apart offensively for the Saints. I don't understand the decision to go with Teddy Bridgewater over Taysom Hill. Bridgewater, in my opinion, has proven time and time again that he can't run this offense. Week 17 last year against Carolina, he was fucking abysmal. He looked like shit in the preseason just a month ago. Yet Sean Payton decides to go with him over Taysom Hill. Now, in Bridgewater's defense, he made some nice throws on that first drive. But the drive was killed by penalties. The Saints just could not get it together offensively. And that first drive was pretty much, the first drive with Bridgewater was pretty much a microcosm of how the game was going to go. Every time he hit a nice pass, someone was holding on the line. After that first drive was destroyed, he just never seemed to find a rhythm. I understand he's going to have to get used to playing with the first team offense. He's been playing with the second team. But some of these mistakes are completely on Bridgewater. He hesitates too much in the pocket, sits in the pocket 4 to 5 seconds, doesn't release the ball. On 1 3rd down, he scrambled outside the pocket. He had 10 yards ahead of him, clear. Was it no one in sight? He hesitated and hesitated until it was too late. Fucking play was over. I was literally screaming at my TV at that point in frustration. I thought the defense played well yesterday. I know a lot of Saints fans on Twitter and on Reddit would disagree with me there. I thought the defense held their own. Other than one big pass play to Cooper Kupp in the first quarter, the Saints defense played pretty well. However, you can't expect them to hold one of the best offensive teams in the NFL the entire game when their offense is doing nothing. The offense under Teddy Bridgewater yesterday was unwatchable. It was painful to watch. What was once an elite level offense in the NFL be reduced to nothing. They didn't score a touchdown the whole fucking day. Now, to me, the turning point in the game happened right before halftime. Saints forced Jared Goff to fumble. He's in the red zone. Cam Jordan returns at 84 yards for a touchdown. Watching this live, this was clearly a fumble. There was no question about it. It wasn't even close. What do the officials do? They fucking call the play dead. They blow it dead. Now, we've had instant replay challenges in the NFL for, 15 years, maybe even longer. It's known that on a fumble, that you let the play go and go to the replay after the fact to determine the correct call. Everybody knows that. You never, under any circumstance, call the play dead. That call resulted in a 14-point swing in that ballgame. Completely changed the momentum. This is inexcusable. 3 games in a row, the Saints have been fucked by NFL officials. At some point, you really have to wonder what the fuck is going on with the officials in the city of New Orleans. The NFL front office in the city of New Orleans. No other team in the league gets screwed over consistently by poor officiating like the Saints do. You had to know going into this game, with what happened last year in the NFC Championship, that the eyes of the NFL world were on this officiating crew. And they fucked it up again. Is it intentional? At this point, I really don't know. I'd like to think there isn't some grand conspiracy against the Saints. But it's hard to argue against it. Do you not think that the NFL front office likes this? What's everyone talking about this week so far? This phone call right here. All the network TV shows, all the debate shows are talking about this. This is leading ESPN, Fox Sports 1, Sports Radio. This story right here. It's good for ratings. It's great for the business of the NFL. It keeps us talking all week about it. Once Brees went down with injury, the most hyped game of the week lost all of its luster. So something had to happen to keep people talking. Whether it's some conspiracy against the Saints, I can't say. But it keeps happening to them. I mean, I don't really believe that there's some grand conspiracy in the NFL front office to screw over the Saints. But at this point, can you really blame people for thinking that? We were talking about the non-pass interference call in the NFC Championship game from 8 months ago. Controversy like that is good for the NFL. It kept us talking the entire offseason. That's all we heard about. When the owners met in the spring, that was one of the main topics of conversation. The new rule instituted on pass interference, being able to challenge it now, came from that non-call. That call yesterday completely changed the outcome of that game. Now, I'm not going to say the Saints were going to win. They probably weren't. But you're talking about the Saints being up 10-3 going into halftime instead of being down 10-3. The scheme of the defense completely changes when you're playing with a lead. After that happened, it was like the wind was let out of the sails. Offense never found a rhythm all day. They probably still wouldn't have, but you get what I'm saying. Eventually, the defense tired out and the Rams began to dominate. I'll be honest, as a Saints fan, it was a hard game to watch. And now it comes out this morning. Drew Brees is out for the next 6 weeks. I try to stay optimistic, but this is not good. It all but looks like the Saints season is over going into week 3. Next 6 games at Seattle with Teddy Bridgewater under center, loss. Dallas at home, loss. Then we got the Bucs at Jacksonville, at Chicago, at home against the Cardinals. With Teddy Bridgewater starting quarterback, I could see the Saints losing those next 6 games. I really could. Jacksonville and Chicago are tough defensively. In my opinion, Taysom Hill should be the starting quarterback. I hate to question Sean Payton. He knows his team better than I do. But after seeing plenty of Bridgewater over the last season or two, I don't see him running this offense any better with a week of preparation. Every time Taysom Hill touches the ball, the defense doesn't know what to expect. He plays loose. He isn't scared to run. He's not scared to pass. Isn't scared to improvise when the play breaks down. Basically, he's the exact opposite of what we've been seeing from Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, it can't get much worse, can it? What do we have to lose by starting Taysom Hill at quarterback? With Bridgewater, we possibly have the next 6 games to lose. I haven't been this depressed about my New Orleans Saints in years. I really haven't. It's a shitty way to start the 2019 season. Since Drew Brees has been in New Orleans, he's maybe missed 1 game due to injury. I think he's only sat 3 games since 2006. And 2 of those games were once the Saints had clinched home field. And he had no reason to play. I just hope that the Saints can win at least 2 to 3 games over the next 6 weeks. Find some way to salvage this season once Drew Brees returns from his injury. All right. Enough of that. Let's get to the good, the bad, and the ugly of the weekend. The good. Once again, Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys looked impressive on Sunday. Fell down 7-0 early on the road at Washington, just like they did last week at home against the Giants, and came back full force and dominated the rest of the game. Prescott is playing hard for this contract extension. He wants that Jared Goff money. I still don't believe he's an elite level quarterback like Goff is on his way to becoming, but it's hard to argue against him getting $30 million per year with the way he's playing right now. Like I said, I don't think he's worth it. But certainly there are worse quarterbacks in the NFL being paid much more money. I'll get to one of those in a second. What impresses me the most right now with Prescott is how accurate he's been through the first 2 weeks of the season. In 2 games, he's completing over 82% of his passes. Only 1 interception thrown thus far. That being said, I'm not a believer in the Cowboys yet. I'm not ready to crown their ass like other media pundits. They've opened with possibly the weakest schedule in the league. Beating the New York Giants and the Washington Redskins is hardly what I would call impressive. Interesting to see what happens when they face a real defense, but that's not going to happen next week because they're going up against the fucking Miami Dolphins. And now, what would have been an extremely difficult game on the road in New Orleans becomes much easier with Drew Brees being sidelined. The Saints defense played well against Dallas last year on the road. So that could be Dak's first true test this year. Unfortunately, I don't think the Saints offense is going to be too much of a challenge for the Dallas defense to handle. Next up for the goods. It's almost impossible to fathom the Patriots continuing to get better this late in Tom Brady's career. But it's happening in front of our eyes. Usually the Patriots are one of those teams that start off slow in September. And historically, they've always struggled against the Dolphins, especially when they play them in Miami. But it feels like Brady and his boys have a point to prove this year. And they're damn well proving it. We all know Tom Brady always will be efficient. But this Patriots defense is the best I've seen since the days of Teddy Bruschi in the early to mid-2000s. Through the first 2 weeks, New England has given up 3 points. They've only given up 492 yards of offense to their opponents so far. 0 touchdowns surrendered. There are some teams in this league that give up 492 yards in a game. New England's holding opponents to 19% on third down. They are beating teams into submission right now. I mean, you blink and the Patriots are already up 21-0. Now, I realize one of those games is against Miami, but they're still an NFL team, kind of. As we talked about before with the Dolphins, they've already given up on this season. But we're going into week 3, and it's already pretty much guaranteed that the Patriots are winning the AFC East title. Not one team in that division is going to challenge them. I'm a big fan of the Buffalo Bills defense right now, but Josh Allen isn't conquering Tom Brady in the AFC East. Not this year anyway. I still think Buffalo's 1 year away from being a really special team. If they can get Josh Allen some receivers on offense, a decent running game, I think the Bills are going to be really special in the years to come. It really confuses me, though, how a team like the Saints or the Seahawks get a tough schedule, especially to open the year. And New England has a schedule even easier than Dallas. Their next 6 games, they won't play one team with a winning record except the Bills and maybe the Browns. Maybe. Check this out. They're at home against the Jets, at Buffalo, which could be a really good game. At Washington, home against the fucking atrocious New York Giants. Then on the road against the Jets, home against the Browns. Now, besides the Bills, you tell me one of those teams that will even give New England a test. In the AFC, in my opinion, it's Kansas City and New England. Every other team is way, way far behind. Now, speaking of Kansas City, the young kid Patrick Mahomes had one of the best second quarters in NFL history yesterday in Oakland. This Chiefs offense is unstoppable. I haven't seen anything like this offensively since the prime years of Drew Brees in New Orleans. 08, 09, 10, those years. Mahomes threw for 278 yards and 4 touchdowns in the second quarter yesterday. The second quarter. One fucking quarter. 15 minutes. Most quarterbacks in this league would pray on a Saturday night for a stat line like that for an entire game on Sunday. Mahomes accomplished that in one quarter. On the road. This hasn't been done since 2008 when Drew Brees threw for 294 yards in the fourth quarter. It's hard to believe that I sometimes forget that Patrick Mahomes is only 23 years old. Think about that for a second. This is his second year as the starting quarterback in Kansas City. He's already won an MVP award, made it to an AFC championship, and this dude potentially has another 17 years to play in the NFL. Still not sold on this Chiefs defense, though. I feel like, once again, it could be their Achilles heel this year. Kansas City has yet to play a high-powered offense. Chiefs right now are just blowing teams out. They were trailing yesterday in Oakland early in the first quarter. Mahomes, he did not look well the first 15 minutes. By the time halftime came around, this game was pretty much over. I mean, how can an opponent respond after getting 4 knockout punches in one round? Like I said a minute ago, I think it's a Chiefs-Patriots rematch this year in the AFC Championship. However, the schedule for the Chiefs is about to get tough. Can't say the same about New England, but the Chiefs has the Ravens, Colts, Texans, and Packers coming up. Brutal stretch. But all 3 of those games are at Arrowhead, one of the tougher stadiums to play at in the NFL. All right, let's get to the bad. God, man, the Pittsburgh Steelers can't catch a break. After a tumultuous season last year with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, the whole situations involving those 2 players, they come into 2019 with high expectations, get embarrassed on national TV last week against New England, come home for a very winnable game against the Seahawks, and things go from bad to worse. The Steelers are driving in the second quarter, and after a pass, Big Ben begins to favor his elbow. There wasn't a hit that I saw. At the time, I really didn't think it was anything major. It was obvious his elbow was bothering him, but watching on TV and after the replay, it didn't look like a big deal. Well, turns out it is. They announced this morning that Big Ben's out for the remainder of the season. He's undergoing elbow surgery on Monday. And with that, the Mike Tomlin era in Pittsburgh comes to an end. I like Mike Tomlin. I feel like he's one of the better coaches in the NFL. He's not at the elite level, but in my opinion, he's one of the better coaches. However, I feel like he made a crucial mistake with Antonio Brown. He let AB have free reign in that locker room. He pandered to him, let him do whatever he wanted. Remember a few years ago when a couple of Steelers players were arrested on their way to the airport before a preseason game? I think they had weed in the car. It might have been Le'Veon Bell. He might have been one of the guys that was in the car. I definitely wasn't Antonio Brown. But my point is, there was little to no punishment given out by Tomlin. Tomlin's a quote-unquote player's coach. Like we talked about before, that style does not work in the NFL. The head coach has to be the general, the leader. I always reference the Patriots or the Saints, maybe even John Harbaugh in Baltimore, because those franchises have long-tenured head coaches. And something they all have in common, they also have very little noise that comes out of their locker room. Even though I like Tomlin, I thought the Steelers should have let him go at the end of last season. With the injury to Big Ben now, it just feels like it's time for Pittsburgh to start fresh with new leadership at the coaching position. If Mason Rudolph, Big Ben's backup, has a good year and is able to lead this team to the playoffs, we could be talking about Big Ben out at Pittsburgh at the end of the season. Big Ben hasn't always been the most popular guy in that locker room. Now, that's a big stretch at this point. But guys in the Pittsburgh locker room are high on Rudolph. He looked decent yesterday. He made some good plays. He made some mistakes as well that are expected from a young quarterback. But overall, I thought he played well. Several Steelers came out after the game yesterday and praised his play. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Pittsburgh through the rest of the year. I mean, they're down 0-2 right now, dug themselves a big hole. The Ravens look unbelievable. Ravens right now the front runner to win that division. So we'll see what happens in Pittsburgh. It was a bad day for a lot of quarterbacks on Sunday. Big Ben and Drew Brees weren't the only ones, though they got the most publicity due to their injuries. Kirk Cousins has no business being a starting quarterback in the National Football League. He might be okay in the CFL in Canada, but at the NFL level, this guy is about as ineffective as Teddy Bridgewater was yesterday. The Vikings looked really good in Week 1 against Atlanta. You want to know why? Cousins only threw the ball 10 times in that game. Yes, when you can limit his touches, keep the ball out of his hands, and let Dalvin Cook take over, let your defense dominate and force turnovers, the Vikings can win a game. The problem is, what happens when you're playing from behind? And that's exactly what we found out on Sunday. Minnesota went down early in Green Bay. At one point, it was 21-0 in the second quarter. Minnesota was able to force some turnovers. Dalvin Cook got going. They were able to get back in the game. Ended up going into halftime 21-10. 21-16 after 3 quarters. About midway through the fourth quarter, the Vikings are driving. They're in the red zone. This is the time late in the game when your quarterback is supposed to put the team on his back and take over. Especially when he's making $28 million a year and one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. What does Kirk Cousins do? The guy who left Washington because he felt they lowballed him and didn't believe he was a franchise quarterback. That guy. What does he do? He throws one of the worst interceptions you'll see from a veteran quarterback all year. This interception was so fucking bad. The play was broken down. All Cousins had to do was throw the ball away. Your defense is playing well. You're shutting down Aaron Rodgers. They haven't scored in the second half. You've got half of a quarter left to go. Yet, Cousins makes one of the worst decisions you'll see all year. If I'm Mike Zimmer and the Vikings front office, I'm fucking furious. This type of play is inexcusable. You aren't going to win many games when your quarterback can only be depended upon to throw the ball 10 times. Because you're afraid he's going to make a terrible decision like he did Sunday in Green Bay. All those things I mentioned earlier that Minnesota needs to win. Defense forcing turnovers, your running game getting going. How often are you going to be able to win games when you're getting ineffective play from your quarterback? I didn't like when Minnesota signed Cousins and let go of Case Keenum. I thought Keenum fit the system well. They were one game away from the Super Bowl in 2017. And you blow up that offense by letting Keenum go and replacing him with this guy? Minnesota's reaping what they sow. With all the talent on this team, elite wide receivers, elite running back, good defense, all held back by a fucking awful quarterback. All right, let's get to the ugly. Another disappointing weekend in college football. Third week in a row. Third time this year that I've been bored to death at some point throughout the day on Saturday. There were some good to okay games, but for the most part, as a whole, I thought the college football weekend was fucking awful. We talked on Friday about how lackluster the schedule was going into last weekend. No ranked teams playing each other. Out of the top 25 teams, 15 of the games were blowouts. 2 teams had bye weeks. So 65% of the top 25 games were blowouts on Saturday. Contrast that with the NFL yesterday, where we had 9 one-possession games, most coming down to the final drive of the game. I get tired of bitching about college football, but this continues to happen every week. Big programs avoiding each other like the plague, playing schools they have no business sharing the field with. I'm not going to spend too much time ranting about it because I've done so 3 straight weeks now. You know how I feel about it. But I'm just fed up with college football in general. And it sucks because I like college football. When you have big games, it's exciting to watch. It just doesn't happen often enough. You know, I like college football and the NFL for different reasons. The NFL, I like it because the games are very competitive, very close, evenly matched. But when you have a big game in college football, the atmosphere is just different than it is in the NFL. The tailgating, 100 and something thousand people in the stands, a lot of them wearing the team colors. You have the student section, the band. It's just a different atmosphere in college football than it is in the NFL. It just sucks that we only get it a couple of times a year. Take a team like Alabama, for instance, who really has one, maybe 2 games in the regular season that are competitive. Last year, the only 1-possession game Alabama played in was the SEC championship game against Georgia. Every other game was a double-digit win, and then you had the double-digit loss to Clemson in the national championship. It's just boring. Same thing is happening this year. We're nearly 4 weeks into the season, and Alabama has played no one. This week they play Southern Miss. Come the fuck on. There isn't a tough game on the Alabama schedule until November. Who cares if Alabama wins a national championship? What have they really won if they don't play anyone all year? Champions of what? Because you beat Southern Miss? South Carolina? Now, I'll admit, week 4 of the college football schedule improves. We have 3 games between top 25 teams. Even some of the other games between ranked and unranked opponents are interesting. Utah's traveling to Los Angeles to play USC. Texas is playing Oklahoma State. For the first time all year, I'm actually somewhat looking forward to a college football Saturday. All right, you want to know what else was ugly this weekend? My NFL bets. My God, was I way the fuck off with my NFL bets on Sunday. Brutal. 0-5. Fared a little better with the college picks going 1-1-1. But my NFL plays were dreadful. I can't remember the last time I went 0-5 on a Sunday in the NFL. I was bad. Embarrassing. Even in my pool play, where I had to pick every game, it wasn't much better. I ended up hitting about 40% of my pool plays. I talked coming into the season how difficult it is to bet in September. It's the only month of the year where, historically, sportsbooks had never had a losing month. They bank most of their money for the season in September. Once we get into October, it gets a little bit easier to bet these games because we know the teams a lot better. It's a long season, though. We still have time to make a comeback, and we should. It'll get better. Now, in my defense, there's no way I could have known that Big Ben and Drew Brees would be out of the game in the first half. Brees on the second possession of the game. But still, no excuses. Rough weekend for my NFL plays. All right, I'm going to close out today with the ugliest thing of the weekend. A strong argument could be made for my NFL bets being the ugliest thing that happened this weekend. I couldn't argue against it. But what I'm about to mention is a problem, and this needs to be addressed. Is it just me, or is the officiating in the NFL getting worse? I mentioned the most egregious offense of the weekend earlier, which happened in the Saints-Rams game. That just can't happen. Blowing a play dead on a fumble recovered for a touchdown. Taking 7 points off the board in an NFL game where points are at a premium. The margin of error is razor thin. The difference between winning and losing could be one play. And you can't take 7 points off the board. It just can't happen. Referees should never be deciding outcomes of games. But it seems to happen more and more often. It just didn't happen to the Saints yesterday either. I'm not being a homer here. The officials took a touchdown off the board in the Vikings-Packers games too. Minnesota's down around the 3-yard line with under a minute to go in the second quarter. Kirk Cousins throws a touchdown pass to Stephon Diggs, and the officials go into the booth to review it. Now, it's under 2 minutes to go, so this is a booth review. They look at the play, and they come back and announce that there was offensive pass interference on the play. After a fucking review. Now, referee John Hussey accidentally left his microphone on and can be heard saying, quote, "Tell me why we're stopping the game, please," unquote, when the booth called for a review. I went back and watched the replay 4 to 5 times. Maybe I'm blind, but I don't know what the fuck they saw on that play that constituted offensive pass interference. Apparently they didn't either, because when the officials announced offensive pass interference, they didn't even name the player who interfered. It was assumed to be Dalvin Cook, but if you watch the replay, that's highly questionable. It's unfucking believable. The league that makes more money than any other sports league, has the most technology to work with, can't get simple calls right. But it doesn't end there. The poor officiating continued throughout the day and affected the end result of another game. Bears-Broncos, as expected, defensive slugfest. Two teams with mediocre, and I'm being kind when I say mediocre here. Two teams with mediocre quarterbacks, but two teams with pretty good defenses as well. Actually, Chicago's defense is phenomenal. One of probably a top 5 defense in this league. All right, here we go. Late in the fourth quarter, Denver drives the field, scores a late touchdown with under a minute to go, ends up tying the game. Chicago's got around 30 seconds to drive the field, try to get into field goal range. First play of the drive, they call roughing the passer on a clean hit to Mitchell Trubisky. I want you to go watch the video of this tackle that the Broncos put on Trubisky. You can't get any cleaner than that hit. It wasn't a headshot. It wasn't a shot at the knees. It was a clean hit to the mid portion of his body, his back. Completely legal. After that, it got even worse, if you can imagine. With 9 seconds remaining, it's 4th and 15. Chicago's at their own 40-yard line. Trubisky danced around for a while before hitting Allen Robinson for a 25-yard pass, putting them in field goal range. Now, everybody in the stands, everybody watching on TV, saw the clock hit triple zeros when the play was blown dead. There's no time left. Game should go into overtime. Apparently, these officials are special, though. They either have ESP or they're mind readers, because they say Chicago called a timeout with 1 second left, even though it was fucking obvious when the whistle blew to blow the play dead that there was 0 seconds left on the clock. We all know what happened. Chicago kissed the field goal to win the game. Coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, it also helped the Bears cover. They were -2 yesterday in Denver. They won the game by 3. It really feeds into the conspiracy theorists when shit like this happens. It makes it hard to argue that this league isn't rigged. Now, I don't believe it is. I mean, it would be mind-boggling hard to rig an NFL game. I think it's a ridiculous notion that the NFL rigs games. I'll be perfectly honest with you. But it's certainly harder to argue that point when you have this many instances of referee incompetence happening every single week. Something has got to be done about the officiating in the NFL. There's no excuse to have this many blown calls on a weekly basis. Like I said earlier, Some of these calls are taking points off the board in games where most of the games are decided by 3 to 7 points. This is a big fucking deal. Something's got to be done about it. But it keeps us talking. And that's all the NFL cares about. All right, I'm out of here. Even though there were a lot of negatives this weekend, it was still a great weekend of football. I was highly entertained Sunday. There was a lot of close games. So I don't want to complain too much about the NFL. I'll be back on Friday morning with news from the week, my college football picks. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the like button and subscribe on whichever platform that you're listening on. Leave a comment in the section below. I'll see you guys on Friday. Have a good week.